6 of the 7 appointees on the Supreme Court were chosen by Republicans in the House and in the Senate. I guess they were 6 out of the 7 were chosen by Republicans in the House. I think 4 out of the 7 were chosen by Republicans in the Senate. So the way we choose judges in Virginia is the legislature chooses them. The Republicans who chose them, who were the majority in 11, 13, 15, and 17, based on those elections, were working out of racially gerrymandered districts. So in 2011, the Republicans decided that if you pack a bunch of black voters, particularly minority voters, but it tends to be black voters, in a district, and you call them all in one district, and that what it does is it means the black voters might get one. It's all about this one person, one vote, and breaking it as much as possible. So the black voters might vote 98-2 for their one delegate, but then there'd be less black voters, therefore less Democrats in the surrounding districts, and therefore that's gerrymandering, right? And it's how you can take a district, a state that, like Virginia, is 55% Democratic, and make it a 55 or 60% Republican one. And they did it through racial gerrymandering. Now, the United States Supreme Court, in its wisdom or lack thereof, has said that the good news is you can't racially gerrymander. Voting Rights Act says you can't do that. So you can't racially gerrymander. However, the Supreme Court says you can politically gerrymander. And they invite us to politically gerrymander as much as you want. And the Supreme Court is just fine if a state that's 35% Republican has a permanent lock on the elective process because, well, they're Republican too. After all, remember how the United States Supreme Court was chosen, right? 5 of the members were chosen by a president who lost the popular vote. Although, to be fair, 2 of them were in Bush's second term, where he did win the popular vote. But the 3 Trump judges were chosen by a president who lost the popular vote and by a Senate who lost the popular vote. And Clarence Thomas was chosen by a Democratic Senate. That was before the rule set up by Mitch McConnell, which is that when the Senate and Republic and the president are different parties, the president gets no judicial nominees. That's a new rule set up by McConnell with Merrick Garland. Didn't used to be that way. Democrats used to approve, like Clarence Thomas, used to approve Bush judges. So they have manipulated the system to control the United States Supreme Court. And now the illegally racially gerrymandered Republican districts were used to choose the current Virginia Supreme Court, which is packed with Republicans. Now, will they be fair? I hope so. I hope so. I pray so. I did everything I could to require fairness. First of all, I fought Amendment 1 with every stretch I could. Secondly, I put forward a Virginia transparency requirement for redistricting that passed the House of Delegates, but was killed in the Senate by Republicans and a number of Democratic senators as well, that said, hey, you shouldn't be able to work behind closed doors and draw up maps in secret and then just present them on us. You should do everything in the open so that we don't have closed door rooms. And Virginia 2021 opposed transparency. They used to say they wanted transparency. Remember when they were fighting for Amendment 1? No, they opposed the transparency in my bill. They apparently don't want transparency. And so all I can say is I hope and pray they'll be fair. I hope and pray that the fact that I was so ornery and raised such a stink about it will, if they're unfair, cause tremendous public criticism, and that their fear of that public criticism means they will back into being fair. My also hope is that it never goes to the Virginia Supreme Court in the first place. That'd be great if it doesn't. But as you know, the amendment is designed to make it very easy to fail. If only 2 Republicans choose to make it fail, it fails. Under the commission, it doesn't require 9 out of 16 votes to pass. It requires 15 out of 16 votes to pass. So any 2 legislators, Republican or Democrat, any 2 legislators can kill the whole process, which again, I thought was a flaw in Amendment 1 to begin with. Now, if it all works out perfectly and all my criticisms have been wrong, no one would be happier than me. I really, really hope I'm wrong. I hope all my criticisms are overblown. I hope we get fair maps. I really do. But at this point, I've tried everything I could legislatively. I've tried everything I could with my loud mouth. I've done everything I could publicly. I've written articles. I've talked. At this point, it's just a hope and a prayer. And If they are unfair, I hope we raise a public stink. Now, we won't be able to do anything about it for 10 years, except complain. But again, my hope is that at least the fear of us complaining will cause people to do the right thing. And again, I did not want to be proved right. I said I did not want to be Cassandra. Cassandra was the Roman. I don't know if she was a goddess. Maybe she was, who famously was cursed by the gods to always tell the truth and always be right. And she would pretend doom, and no one would believe her. And then the doom would happen, and everyone would be very upset. They should have listened to Cassandra. And I said, don't please, call me. Call me names, but don't call me Cassandra, because I don't want to be right. I really, really hope I'm wrong, and all my fears go out the window, and we have a very fair process. But the whole process is designed, remember, for incumbent protection. This process was not designed. I wanted a nonpartisan, independent citizens commission. What would happen was a partisan incumbent protection scheme whereby the four leaders of both houses choose everyone on the panel, the citizens and the non-citizens. And so really it actually gives less, at least under the old system, every member of the General Assembly had a voice. Now it's just the four leaders. And so it's designed very much like New Jersey's for incumbent protection. And I presume those are the lines they're going to draw. With incumbent protection with a Republican bias, because Republicans know that if only two object, it goes to the Supreme Court. Nobody wants that. So presumably they'll be able to be tougher in negotiation. But we'll find out. We'll find out in September. And you will have the right to complain publicly about the commission. You just won't have a right to complain publicly if it goes to the Supreme Court. My bill would have required that, but the bill passed the House, was killed by a bipartisan in the Senate. By the way, it was bipartisan. There were a couple of Republicans who voted for my transparency bill in both House and Senate. But it was primarily Democrats, and Democrats worked to kill it in the Senate, along with most Republicans. Lots of it is what it is. Okay, so what happens is the Redistricting Commission has to get its initial maps done by 45 days, which is September 30th. Then we have a vote in the General Assembly. Then if we reject it, they get another 2 weeks. We could be voting on it as late as the end of October. And then if we're done, the Supreme Court, there's no limit in time, has to draw the districts. Or if any two Republicans, or any two Democrats, if any two senators or any two delegates object, Supreme Court does it. How does the Supreme Court do it? I wanted to set up a process by which they did it. I actually had required in my legislation that there be two special masters, one appointed by Republicans, one appointed by Democrats, and that the Republicans had to find a plan that both special masters agreed on. That way, it would have Democratic and Republican, at least both sides would be represented. Again, bipartisan coalition in the Senate killed my bill, and so they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. Now, there are some criteria that we put into law. But the Supreme Court isn't obliged to follow those criteria because it's in the Constitution. I hope they do. I hope they will do that. I hope they'll follow our criteria, and one of the things that I did get in the legislation, which I fought really hard for, was to say that you cannot use it for political advantage. You cannot draw the lines to favor either political party. That was not in the original draft of the legislation. It did come out of a bill I put in there. So that's the one thing that I did get through, that you can't favor either political party. But at the end of the day, the Supreme Court, Virginia Supreme Court, is legislature, judge, and jury, right? Which, by the way, is also a violation of separation of powers, which is another problem. Basically, in every other aspect of Virginia law, the legislature writes the law, the executive signs it or amends it, can veto it, and the courts interpret it. In redistricting, if the commission fails, the Supreme Court is the legislature. They draw the lines. They are the executive. They decide how they're implemented, and they're the judges. They decided whether they were fair or not. So the question is, if you want to ask the Supreme Court if they've been fair, you can't go to federal court now because U.S. Supreme Court says you can't. You go to the Supreme Court and you say, hey, Supreme Court, I want to sue the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court says they're unfair. And lo and behold, the Virginia Supreme Court will probably hold that the Virginia Supreme Court fairly decided that action. It's kind of like asking the king to appeal a ruling of the king. And the king will say, I've considered your appeal and I consider that I did the right thing. So one of the problems with this whole Amendment 1 is that we don't have separation of powers, which is actually required in 3 other sections of the Virginia Constitution and there's never been in the history of the United States any time where a court gets to, just sort of make up lines based on what it wants. But again, maybe they will follow our legislative criteria. I hope they will. I pray they will. Maybe public pressure will encourage them to do it. They don't want to be in the crosshairs of criticism. But in the day, we don't have an executive, we don't have a legislature overseeing them anymore. So all we have is the fourth estate, right? The press, the people. All we have is your voices to keep them honest. That's all we have left, because I've tried every which way. That's all we have left. And hopefully my own criticisms, which I've made very, very loud, and a few others have made very loud, will encourage them to do the right thing, and we'll come up with fair maps, in which case, if it all comes wrong, if it all goes well, people like, see, Mark, all your criticisms were misplaced. It may well be, though, that the criticisms are what caused them to be fair in the first place. So I hope that's the case. What I really don't want is to be Cassandra. I don't want to be right about the fact that it's going to come out unfair. I really hope I'm wrong, and I hope that my criticism will push them to do the right thing. Kyle.
Kyle,